Welcome to our AuthorConnect Chat today. I am your host, Danielle Brown. As head of strategic partnerships and editorial, I work with authors, publishers, agents, publicists, and other incredible industry partners here at BookPal, where we believe in the transformative power of books to ignite continuous learning and growth. Stick around for more announcements at the end of this chat, including the winners of 3 signed books. But for now, I want to get to the good stuff. Our guest today is a scholar, an entrepreneur, and a pastor, as well as an award-winning clinical professor of management and organizations at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. He is also the founder and CEO of the Vocati Group, a boutique global management consultancy, and assistant pastor of Chicago's historic Apostolic Church of God. Last but certainly not least, he is the author of The Purpose Path, a guide to pursuing your authentic life's work. Please welcome Nicholas Pearce.
Thank you so much, Danielle.
Yeah, Nicholas, thank you so much for being here. We are so lucky to have you on the series and to be talking about your book, The Purpose Path. For those who might not already know, can you just help us kick things off by talking a little bit about your book and why you wrote it?
Absolutely. So thanks once again for inviting me, and thanks to all of your colleagues at BookPal, and hello to our entire audience joining us today. I wrote The Purpose Path because I had the opportunity through my professorial work at Northwestern University, through my pastoral work, as well as through my consulting work at the Vocati Group. I had the opportunity to speak with literally thousands of leaders, some of them in the nonprofit space, some in the corporate space, some who were baby boomers and were thinking about retirement, some who were Gen Xers at the midpoint of their careers, others millennials on the front end. And what I found was, whether these were leaders in organizations or just everyday people like you and me, a lot of people were not living free. And by that, I mean that they were living kind of trapped in their own routines. They were on autopilot. They were going to work, doing what they do. They would be upset on Saturday night because Sunday was coming, and that meant only one more day of rest before the week starts. It was this very difficult cycle that so many people found themselves in, where they were just on autopilot, going through life, playing to the beat of a drum that was beating for them, set by somebody else. And they were at points where they were ready to live their lives and finally come off of autopilot, but they didn't know how. It was scary. They didn't understand what coming off of autopilot would mean. And so I wanted to write this book to address people who are trying to figure out how to connect their daily work with their life's work, how to align their soul with their role. And this is a conversation, interestingly, Danielle, that I had with my editor at St. Martin's Press, who was asking me, as you are, I'm sure, aware, to try to narrow the audience. Can you pick your super sharp, pointy demographic that you're targeting? Are you targeting millennials, or are you targeting baby boomers? Are you targeting mid-career professionals? And I just said, yes, I'm targeting all of them. I'm targeting people who are wage earners. I'm targeting people who are in college. I'm targeting all of them, because this book literally can speak to you at any stage of life. If you're on the front end of your career, or maybe even you haven't started your career, maybe you're in college or in high school and you're trying to figure out, what do I want to be when I grow up? What should I become when I grow up? Or perhaps even more importantly, who do I want to become when I grow up? And how can I use my education to prepare me for my calling, not just a career? Or for the millennial who's saying, I've got my degrees, I've got my student loan debt, check, check. I took a job because I need to pay some bills, but now I'm feeling unfulfilled. I'm feeling like I'm on the wrong track and I want to get out of this rut. Maybe someone who's approaching the mid-career stage who's saying, I've built some things, but were these the right things to build? I have success. I'm at the pinnacle of my career, perhaps even. But even though Wall Street may applaud me, even though the community may applaud me, or whoever my constituencies may be, they're happy with what I've done. But am I happy with what I've done? And perhaps even more importantly, was that work even mine to do in the first place? Right. And then certainly people who are approaching what some scholars call the third of life, where they're in a position where their brain still works, their body still works, their relationships still work, their finances still work. They still want to be vital and contribute, but they're asking, if I'm in the third of my life, I need to make this piece count. I'm not going to get a do-over. And so I want to be able to use my skills, my resources, my relationships, etc., in service of something meaningful, something significant, not just successful. And so I wanted to be able to ask the 5 questions I pose in my book to all of these groups so that it can guide ongoing reflection again and again throughout the various seasons and stages of life.
Yeah, I really love that you clearly tailored this so that it can help someone at any age, at any point in their career, any stage, no matter how much or how little they've accomplished so far. This is such a personal journey for someone to go through. And that's what makes it so universal, because it really is tailored to someone's personal experiences. But I think something you touch on in the book, and something I've witnessed in my life, is there's always kind of that tipping point for someone, right? That feeling of, oh, have I really done anything that I'm proud of? Or am I using my education the way that I meant to? Like, people kind of reach that block where they panic or are trying to figure that out. What is the journey after that point in an ideal situation, and especially with your book to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is the reason why I entitled my book The Purpose Path, not The Purpose Destination. I think a lot of people think of purpose as like this holy grail that you kind of journey to, and the trophy is just waiting for you and now you've got it. And instead of thinking of it like that, I think that there is purpose in the journey itself. You mentioned like not using your education or your degree in the way that you intended. Certainly, when I went to MIT to study chemical engineering, I was not going thinking that I was going to use this degree to be a business school professor, an entrepreneur, and a pastor. Like, the two do not align. So I think it's okay. And I want to take some of the pressure off of people who feel like perhaps there have been some missteps, some miscalculations, some detours, some rerouting in the GPS of your life. Don't be afraid that you have somehow wasted time or that the time can't be redeemed. If you have breath in your body, you still have time. And I honestly believe that it is very true that in some of those detours and those unscripted moments that we might look at as distractions or missteps or misfortune, that we actually can discover purpose. It is in those moments where we feel like we might be off track that we are exactly right where we belong, even if it's learning what is not our work to do, or perhaps the directions in which we should not head. Maybe these are directions that other people told us were good. Maybe these are definitions of success that we have inherited from other people's scorecards, maybe our parents or our loved ones, our community members, certainly the media and social media in particular, with this kind of plastic highlight reel that we see in everybody's life. It sets up this picture, this image of how we ought to be keeping score. And oftentimes we pursue those definitions of success. And because we're achievement oriented, some of us can actually be successful at pursuing those definitions of success. But there comes a point, Danielle, where many of us recognize, even if we have climbed to the top of the ladder that was put in front of us, we might have actually climbed a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall. Right? And so what you do once you recognize that is don't panic. Don't panic. Be honest with yourself about where you are. Be honest with yourself about the fact that you have a precious soul. You are, I would take it one step further. You are a precious soul. And while you may have been pursuing definitions of success that other people laid out for you, perhaps with the best of intentions, this is an opportunity for you to allow the real you to step forward, for you to pursue your authentic life's work, not just chase after definitions of success that other people have put in front of you.
Yeah, I love that authenticity focus, and that, again, it is all about that personal journey. It's not anyone else's expectations or standards set for you. It's up to you. You decide, and there is joy in that journey, not just in looking at the destination. And you have some really strong statistics in this book too about the percentage of people who feel like they're doing their dream job, which I think is 20%. And then people who, 90%, I think you said, believe that success really is happiness and not power, fame, or money. And again, like you're saying, maybe we climbed those ladders thinking it was going towards power, fame, and money. And then we realized at the top that wasn't what success meant at all. And now we have to pivot and figure out the new journey and the new path that we need to go down. And you talk about this term vocational courage. And I love how you weave courage into here, because I think there is so much courage required to even have that own self-awareness, right? And be like, this was not the path I should have gone down. This isn't the one I wanted, but I have to move forward anyways. There's only somewhere to go than forward. So can you talk a little bit about that courage and what that concept is for you in this book?
Absolutely. So I intentionally lean on the word vocation, as you mentioned. And for a lot of people, vocation means a lot of different things. For some people, they think about vocation as like a strictly religious career decision, right? Other people look at vocation as a politically correct euphemism for blue collar or trades work, right? A vocational school, for example, would prepare you for quote unquote vocational work. But I actually reclaimed the word vocation here. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with blue collar or religious work. I'm a pastor after all. Like this is not in any way to suggest that those ways of thinking about vocation are inappropriate. But the original use of the word vocation, it actually comes from a Latin word that means calling. Thus, I argue in the purpose path that vocation is probably a better organizing framework than career. Career comes from a French word that means racetrack. And so for those of us who have found ourselves in jobs or careers and we've been on the racetrack going round and round in circles, not getting very far very fast, we know what frustration can come on that racetrack. I think back to when I was in high school and I ran track. I ran the 4x800 meter relay. And to this day, Danielle, I cannot run on treadmills or in tracks because they're just something that defeats my soul. Starting in point A, exerting all of this effort, and then finishing in point A. That just feels bad. Right. And so many of us know what that feels like to be exerting a lot of energy and effort, but really not feel like we're making a whole lot of progress. I instead use the word vocation. It's different than career. It means calling. And this means that if there's a calling, then we have to be listening for our caller. And that's key. A lot of people want to put figuring out my calling on their to-do list. And you're going to say, well, if today's a Wednesday, I'm going to figure this out by Saturday night so that Monday I can start activating my calling. That's not quite how it works. But this idea of vocational courage then is having both clarity on what that calling is. And hopefully, as we go through our conversation today, we can talk a little bit about how one can discover one's calling, right? But vocational courage is having clarity about what that calling is, and then the courage to actually do something about it, the commitment to making the hard decisions that are required to align your daily work with your life's work. There's so many people I have met who are doing work over here, but are hoping somehow in the great big ledger book of life that what they did over here will amount to this life's work over here. It's like, no, the math just doesn't check out on that. Your daily work in aggregate, all the thousands of days of your life will add up to your life's work. There's no kind of special back office accounting in heaven that's going to take your daily work and translate it into something else. What you did with your days is what you will have done with your life. And so this whole idea of vocational courage is not just knowing what to do, but it's also making the tough decisions to align what you know to do with what you actually do, your daily work with your life's work. And that's hard. For some people, it's perhaps changing a job. For some people, it may be staying in your current job, but asking for a different kind of assignment. Staying with your current employer, but asking for different assignments that will stretch you and grow you. For some people, it may be going back to school so that they can get the education that will prepare them for their calling. Because I am firmly a believer of the concept that anytime someone receives calling, the first step is always a call to preparation, right? And we see this throughout the ages in human history. Anytime people are called to something great, there is a season of obscurity and preparation that precedes the activation of that calling, right? So there is a courage element here to come off of autopilot, to make some difficult decisions, to have some tough conversations, but to ultimately prioritize the work that only you can do. And I don't mean this to be overly fluffy. The reality is there are some things and there are some types of impact that only you can create with the sphere of influence that you have. And if you don't create that impact, it may go uncreated. And I'm not just talking about the global scale. I'm talking about at the scale of one life at a time. There are people you can influence who I never will, with degrees and pedigree. And Danielle's very kind in sharing some of my background with you. But there are some people that only you will be able to influence and impact. And if you don't do it, it may not get done. So that courage is taking that first step to know what to do, but then actually doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so empowering to hear you talk about that, and really inspiring reading about that courage. And one of the quotes that has stuck with me for a long time, I think, is from Bob Proctor, who said, "Fear and faith both demand you to believe in something you cannot see." And I really just felt that with this idea of vocational courage and taking the leap of faith. And at one point, you even talk about how true success is akin to faithfulness. So I wanted to hear from you a little bit about how that idea of faith plays a role in vocational courage, and how has it maybe played a role in some of the people you've seen go through this journey and discover their calling.
Absolutely. So it's no secret that I am a pastor, and I don't intend for that to be a secret. Yet at the same time, I am aware that the audience that I would want to reach and have been blessed to reach with this book, at this point, well over 12,000 copies of the book have landed in people's hands and people's iPads and on people's Audible playlists, right? So I'm grateful for that. And I recognize that not all of those individuals share my faith perspective, my faith tradition. Not everyone would call themselves even faithful. Some are atheists, but it's interesting. I have had some conversations over the course of my book tour with individuals, some of faith, others not, who said, even though I may not personally subscribe to your faith tradition and its tenets, you gave me some things to think about here, because I do recognize that we are spiritual beings. We alone have the capability of asking existential questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What's it all for? What's the goal of life? What's the meaning of life? And so this book intends and endeavors to provide insight that individuals can use from a variety of religious and spiritual locations. Nevertheless, for me, faith is essential. And as you mentioned, both faith and fear do require us to believe in that which we can't see. And for me, my faith plays a critically important role in understanding calling, as it has for many others, countless others, in fact. This idea of calling requires us to hear from our caller, right? And I would argue that our Creator is the one who calls us, just as a car's manufacturer is the one that gets to determine what its purpose is, what its intended highest and best use is. I believe that part of the challenge that we have in connecting with our caller to hear calling is that we move too fast. Our society is so fast paced. And I think if there's anything we can take from the time of pandemic, it is that there is virtue in slowing down, because many of us are going at such a fast pace that we don't have time to listen. We don't have time to hear. And so we're going a mile a minute, hoping to receive insight about what else we should be doing, but we're stuck in our routines, spinning a mile a minute. And part of this is slowing down to hear, to remove a lot of the clutter so that we can receive and then begin to prepare to do. Right. And so I think a lot of that does require faith. It does require a deeper awareness, not only of the self, but one's own position vis-a-vis the entirety of creation, and what our responsibility is to stimulate, to activate human flourishing, to be able to inspire, encourage, uplift others. And I have to add here, because this conversation can become very daunting very quickly if we don't kind of add this caveat. I am not in any way suggesting that the measure for faithfulness is scale. Right? We live in a world where bigger is always better. More people, more profit, more money, more followers on social media, the more the merrier, the bigger the better. And that's not actually what I'm saying here. I am saying faithfulness is actually the goal, which means it is simply being aligned in terms of what you do every day and what you feel called to do with your life. One decision at a time, not in some big macro way. One decision at a time, one yes at a time, I believe, is how we should be thinking about measuring our lives and keeping score. And that may not mean big scale in terms of our impact, our name and lights, a blue badge next to our name on our favorite social media platform, suggesting that we have millions or tens of thousands of followers. And that's not what I'm saying. Because a lot of the people who we look up to as quote unquote successful, they may be public successes, but they're private failures, right? And I'm not suggesting that, we throw stones at anyone, because none of us is perfect. All I'm saying is, let's not get caught up in the definition of success that equals scale of significance outside of one's home. because you can be a public success and be a private failure. All I'm saying is, let's just be faithful to what it is that we're called to do, both outside of our homes, but also within them, within our families and those closest spheres of influence with those we love.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk a lot about this concept of alignment, and I love the way that you put it. And obviously, we at BookPal, we work with a lot of organizations, and I know in your consulting work, you work with organizations as well, and business leaders and nonprofits. So I'd love to hear how that alignment process comes into play in the workplace, whether it's top down, how do leaders help better align their employees' work with their own purposes, and vice versa, how can employees better engage with their leadership in aligning their work with their life's work?
Yes, a great, great question. This is where the rubber meets the road. I think a lot of us find ourselves on reactionary mode when it comes to our employers. We give our employers too much power. We let our employers pigeonhole us, sub-optimize us, and then we try to figure out how to pursue meaning or purpose in our spare time. And what I would argue is that each of us owes it to ourselves to really be careful giving away the best of your life simply for a paycheck. Now, let me also be clear that this is not suggesting that those who don't have the luxury of deciding what they want to be when they grow up have somehow missed the mark. Not at all. I think of my own great great grandfather, who was only able to attain a second grade education because he had to care for his family in the American South post Reconstruction. And opportunities were not abundant for people like me, like him. And a lot of that legacy of educational access, economic opportunity, being constrained for certain groups of people, not just in the US, but globally, that legacy still exists. So this is by no means to suggest that if you don't have the luxury of picking what you want to be when you grow up, that your life is somehow less meaningful. But for those of us who do have the luxury of choice in orienting our lives in various directions, I would say let's just do so with intent. And from an employer perspective, I would say for those who may be managers and leaders who are joining us today, there are a couple of angles to think about this. One is the angle of how you engage with your people. Right? Now, let's just face it. In so many parts of organizational life, whether for profit or not for profit, managers have the perverse incentive to sub-optimize their people. They have, as Parker Palmer puts it, a degree of complicity in the diminishment of their people. Here's how that story works. If Danielle works for me and I know Danielle is really good at processing those TPS reports and getting them filed on time, yet I know in my time with Danielle that she's made for more than this, and she's expressed interest in growing her career, perhaps even moving into new and bigger spaces that align with her sense of selfhood and her sense of calling. As her manager, I am perversely incentivized to diminish that and just say, she's really good at these TPS reports. I'm giving her a check to do these TPS reports, and that's what she's going to do. I don't care about her calling. I don't care about her vision. I don't even care about her well-being. I really just care about her being well enough to do this job with minimal complaint. And that, friends, is it's a challenge to be polite. I would call it violence, to be frank. It is psychological and spiritual violence against people, using them as human doings instead of esteeming them as fellow human beings. All right. So step one here for leaders and managers who may be joining us is to think about building human relationships with people where you care about their humanity and their being, not just their productivity. Because if all you care about is their productivity and their doing, then they're very close to being replaced by a machine. And I'm not suggesting that machine learning is bad or that artificial intelligence is inherently wrong. All I'm saying is we have to see more value in people than just what they produce. So that's one. The flip side of this is also, as a leader or manager, to be thinking about the organization as a whole and how the organization exhibits vocational courage. How does the organization define its why? And how does it make sure that its activities, its strategies, its programs, its procedures, its processes align with why it exists? And this is just as true in the for-profit space as it is in the not-for-profit space or even the government space. Remember why you started. And in the nonprofit space, they call this challenge mission creep. How do we avoid expanding our mission to encompass everything within a mile of what we do? We are a school. Our mission is to educate, to inspire the next generation to be great human beings and productive citizens in society. Yet, along the way, we discover that 50% of our students are food insecure. So then we decide to also start a food pantry. And then we also discovered that 20% of our students are functionally unhoused, right? They don't have a permanent place to live. And so we decided to start a shelter in the basement of the school that operates at night. And then we discover that so many of those families are unbanked. They don't have bank accounts. They take their family earnings and wages at the end of the week to a check casher or currency exchange where they have to pay to access their own money. So you know what we do? We start a credit union, right? We start doing all these things that, yes, they benefit people in our space, but that's not really who we are. Instead of building these things that are ancillary and don't really align with who we are and why we exist, perhaps we should be partnering with organizations whose purpose and mission are that. And we can build a bridge of collaboration and partnership instead of building this massive social services under one roof kind of organization. Like, that's just not what we're here to do. The same thing is true in terms of the corporate space, right? This vocational courage for the organization. Our purpose should determine how we make our decisions about what to do and how. In the corporate space, I have spent time with Fortune 100 executive teams, and they'll bring me in to help them with their organizational culture. And they'll ask me to help them tinker with their processes and their practices and their procedures, their onboarding, to help make the culture stronger. And I'll always ask, what is your purpose? Why does company XYZ exist? Is it simply for maximizing shareholder value? Or is there some value proposition for a broader set of stakeholders, inclusive of shareholders, but other stakeholder groups like your customers or clients or your employees themselves? Does the organization have a responsibility to the employees as people? Does the organization have a responsibility to the communities within which it operates? These sorts of questions. And making sure that purpose remains central and primary, or as Stephen Covey calls it, keeping the main thing the main thing, right? So this vocational courage conversation has direct applicability to leaders and organizations in the ways that I just described. And I hope that as individuals go on the journey for themselves, that they'll also think about how to inspire vocational courage in others and their organizations.
Absolutely. This is just so much good content. I feel like I could talk to you about this all day. There's so much to learn from you. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. So, Nicholas, just the last thing I want to ask is, what is the best way for viewers of this chat to connect with you after watching and to get in touch with you?
Awesome. Thank you for that. I am on social media at NAPPHD. NAPPHD on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or even Clubhouse. So connect with me on social media. Let me know that you joined us here in the BookPal AuthorConnect Chat, and be happy to stay in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicholas, for sharing your amazing insights with the BookPal community. And thank you to those of you who are attending live today or who are watching this recorded. If you have not already, I highly recommend Nicholas's book, The Purpose Path. It is powerful and engaging, extremely inspiring and empowering. And I already know ways that this is helping me just go on the right journey and on the right path. And I'm so excited about it. I'm so glad that I have a copy. So if you're interested in purchasing 25 copies or more of The Purpose Path for a team, an organization, or a community, you can visit bookpal.com or email sales@bookpal.com. And then to our live attendees, I just want to let you know that we will be sending out an email with the recording of this chat next week. So keep your eye out and make sure that you're subscribed to our newsletter to be the first to know about all of our upcoming events. Our next Author Connect will be on June 1st at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, where the president of BookPal, Tony, will be chatting with Rich Divany about his book, The Attributes. So make sure you're subscribed to our Author Connect newsletter and visit our website to see more of our upcoming events. And before we sign off, I just want to announce our 3 winners for the signed copies of The Purpose Path from Nicholas. Our giveaway winners are Max Z, Jessica W, and Lavon M. We have your email addresses and we'll be reaching out for more information, but thank you so much for being here and for participating. Thank you so much again, Nicholas, for joining us, and we'll see everyone next time. Until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep growing. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.